Okay, so we're live and we're so excited. Today, we are featuring at the 17th Education and Development Conference, we are featuring the panel discussion titled Reinforcing Humanity in Education. And we are very passionate about this topic, and our insightful speakers today will help us explore and find answers to the questions where we stand today, what is the world that we envision for ourselves and the future generations, what is that we can improve, and what type of education can help us get there. So I will first introduce our panelists today, Susanna Nicol. She is a specialist in child emotional intelligence and is the face behind EQ for Kidz. She created this program based on her educational background in early childhood education and developmental psychology. Through her extensive experience teaching children in schools and in the home, she observed an important piece of children's intelligence missing in education: the ability to cope with hard feelings, to be a kind friend, to preserve hardships, and to understand and empathize with others. Susanna not only understands the science behind emotions, but also how to coach practical tools and strategies to develop EQ in the early years, when it matters most. She believes that EQ skills can and should be developed early in life. In the same strategic way, we teach children IQ skills. This is why she has carefully created a customized program that benefits all children, no matter where they are starting from. Nicolas Kyriakides is one of the Cyprus's most celebrated young commercial lawyers and academics, well known both nationally and internationally. He is a graduate of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. He holds postgraduate degrees from UCL, a New York University, and a PhD from the University of Oxford. He has also been a visiting researcher at Harvard University, where he worked with Professor David Rosenberg. He teaches at the University of Nicosia and has contributed to a number of high-level innovative legal research initiatives and papers in the course of both his commercial practice and his academic life. Through his legal, economic, and academic initiatives, Nicolas is actively advocating and contributing to making a more equitable and just society. Nicolas is also closely involved with the Cyprus Forum, a high-level conference for members of government, private and public sector leaders, senior academics, and media, designed to be a catalyst for change. So welcome, Nicolas. Lisa Wilson is a co-founder of C.A.R.E, a coalition of dynamic activists and change agents who develop curriculum and professional learning offerings that empower professionals to fight and advocate for social justice and human rights towards an equitable and inclusive world for all people. As previous professional development coordinator for Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge pilot in Los Angeles County, Lisa expanded her passion for quality programs for all children to close opportunity gap. She is previous chair and co-chair of Child Care and Early Education Task Force, as well as a member of a Community Voices, and has worked in the field of early childhood development for over 20 years. She is a passionate advocate and devoted teacher. She believes that every student deserves the opportunity to reach their divine purpose and highest learning potential. Welcome, Lisa. Professor Kimberly Barker is highly motivated educational leader and DEI activist. She is committed to continuing her endorsement of educators and child and family education professionals. Kim has a BA in Child, Adolescent, and Family Studies and MA in Education and Child and Family Leadership. She advocates and promotes the overall equitable, healthy development and support of students, children, adolescents, family, colleagues, and community. She is a mom to two beautiful children she enjoys spending her free time with. She feels raising her children is the most important job she will ever have, and loves that child development follows her home. Along with Lisa, Kim also is a co-host of the podcast Fireside Chat, where she hosts the most distinguished and insightful individuals from all over the world. So welcome our panelists. Let's dive in right away. And the first question I would like to ask you, and I will start with you, Lisa. What do you think should be the purpose of education? And are we doing that as educators? I guess it's two questions in one.
So, well, thank you so much for the question. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I think the purpose of education for me in my life is to create spaces where children really feel a sense of really love and safety. I also think that one of the purposes of education is to be a facilitator of children's learning process at their pace on a continuum, really understanding, you know, from theory to practice and how we nurture critical thinking. Do I think that it's happening? I think that it's happening in some places. I think some educators are definitely committed to that style of facilitating education. They're committed to each individual child. I don't think that it's happening on a collective. I feel like we could do a lot more by doing things like this, you know, sharing space with other educators from around the world, not just, you know, within our own, you know, countries or within our own cities. I think that really limits our perspective. I feel that the purpose is for us to learn from one another and to stay on that path of learning continually. I think that's what stunts a lot of educators, is that they stop their learning process, they stop their thinking process. And since children are evolving and this world is evolving, if we stop our learning, then I don't feel like we can be the best resource for children and families.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Nicolas, what do you think that the purpose of education should be?
Hi from me, and thanks so much for inviting me as well. Well, judging from my own experience, I think what is very important is for someone to acquire the required skills, first of all, to be able to be useful for the society. But then on, it's very important for someone to be able to be a critical thinker, also to have ethos, and also be able to you know, be familiar with physical education as well as arts. And these all of these characteristics, I mean, are not new. They come from, you know, from the very old times, from the ancient Greece. What I would, I mean, comparing the education I received from the different places, I was a student. So I was a student in Cyprus, in Greece, in the UK, in the US. And I think that it's very, you know, dangerous sometimes if education does not let you think freely. On the other hand, it's extremely useful and it's very, you know, eye-opening when you have educators and, you know, you're surrounded by people and you know, the general culture and encourages you to explore, to read, to question everything. So I think this is what education should be about. Now, whether this is happening, I completely agree with Lisa. In some places it does, in other places it doesn't. It needs a lot of effort to you know, to improve, and that's why I think we have this kind of conferences.
Thank you very much, and I really like that you brought up the topic of arts and culture, and I know that you are very passionate about giving voices to different perspectives and opinions in the initiatives that you are making in Cyprus. So thank you very much. Susanna?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, ideally the purpose of education would be to let every individual explore, learn, and grow at their own pace and in their own way. So I think that education should encourage that curiosity that kids have, the imaginative mind, their creativity, their innovation, all of these skills that You know, I see kind of the light dying in their eyes as they go from kindergarteners to 12th grade sometimes, that they get less creative and less curious. And my hope for education is that it instills a love for learning from an early age. You know, I was lucky enough to grow up in Nigeria, West Africa, where we didn't have a school. So, you know, my mom homeschooled me, and I was taught these kind of personal core values, to love learning, to be eager, to, you know, to be kind, to be empathetic. And I just wish that this was being instilled in the education system, these types of core values for individuals. It's one of the reasons why, you know, I studied early childhood education, but then after 6 or 7 years in the school, I decided to leave because I felt that this purpose wasn't being achieved. You know, I think it was Carl Sagan that described it in the way he said, you know, I walked into a kindergarten classroom and they're all scientists. They're so eager and curious. They're asking amazing questions like, you know, why is the moon round? And, you know, why is the grass green? And they're so eager to learn. And then he walks into a 12th grade classroom. And it's, you know, it's clear that they've learned to sit down and be quiet and follow the rules. And so there's something that's going wrong in between the kindergarten and 12th grade years that really needs to be addressed in education. And so I'm so thankful to be here having this important conversation of how to bring back humanity, how to bring back that, you know, that basic foundation to enjoy the learning process. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that curiosity that you mentioned, it really reminds me of my favorite book, The Little Prince. Yeah, at some point we really stop asking questions, we lose our curiosity, and I also wonder, but we don't have time to discuss that, what role the education, culture, and society, even the way parents are raising us, play in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kim, what about you?
I believe education needs to address the whole child, the whole human. We have to look at all the developmental domains and make sure that we are supporting the child in every aspect. We're supporting them in their ability to see their individual value. We're providing them a space where they are acquiring an ability to embrace their skill sets, no matter what their interests are, that they are valued in their thoughts, and that we want them to be to inquire. We want them to be creative, and I think that overall support of who they are as an individual, what they bring to their community, what they bring to this world, is truly something we need to be addressing in education and supporting for long-term longevity of an impactful society that embraces each other and camaraderie and collectivism. Do I think that that's happening? I think, as Lisa mentioned, it's happening in many areas, but I do believe that there is still a deficit and a gap that has not been met. And so I think there's a collective understanding at this point that that needs to happen, and that we need to see a shift and a change in the way we are approaching education and in the way we are supporting our children in the acquisition of every skill as a whole child.
Thank you so much, Kim, which brings me to another question. So we addressed in a way what is missing here, but what do you think would be a solution? In other words, what is missing in our educational system that we are not teaching our children?
Are you asking me?
Well, you can start. Yes.
Okay, great. I think that what is missing is a valuing of lived experiences. a valuing of what children are bringing to our communities, to the school systems, to their education, to their families. A valuing of families. There's a gap in the need to understand that families are our children's first teacher, and they are our children's first support system. And so if we can foster the growth and strengthenings of family, we can foster the ability for children to come into these spaces and learn. So I think that we've got to begin looking at families as partners in our children's learning and education. We need to value them in what they bring as partners, and we need to provide spaces that allow them to step in and not just be invited into a classroom, but become part of a classroom and part of the education system.
Absolutely. Learning, we'll have to say, happens in all directions. Susanna, I saw that you were smiling, so I'm curious what you have to add.
Well, I was smiling because of what Kim was saying. I think that it's so valid, that point that families are where children learn the core values that they have. They learn who they are, you know, and they're bringing that into the classroom. So how do we connect those two environments, the home and the school environment, in a seamless way? And that happens with bringing them into the classroom and making them a part of it. You know, I studied early childhood education, but also psychology, and I realized that there wasn't much of an overlap there. And there's not much of an overlap in the home and school environments. And I think that this is something that is really missing in the education system. We need to look at the child as a whole, as you said, Kim, and, you know, value the fact that they have a story to tell, the fact that we can actually learn so much from kids. You know, their emotions matter. We should talk about them in the classroom. Their family lives matter. So I just, when I was studying psychology in university, there was a lot of talk about what could go wrong with our brains. You know, I learned we studied case studies after case study on, you know, ailments and issues and problems with the brain. But what if we could reframe that in education to think of what could go right if we start in the early years? What could go right with our brain? How can we develop a growth mindset? You know, how can we develop these important social skills, like knowing how to communicate with someone about how you feel, knowing how to listen to people, knowing how to empathize with another person's perspective. And that's why, you know, I founded EQ for Kids, and I kind of went my own way because I didn't see a place for it in the current education system yet. And so for me, that's what's missing, is the connection between you know, our amazing human brains and all these capabilities that we have, and why are we not explicitly teaching these skills in the early years before it's too late in the game, and then we have to kind of repair the adult? You know, that's what we learned in psychology. So I would love to see an approach that fosters emotional and social intelligence.
Absolutely. I'm going to come back to you because I have a question around that. But first, Lisa, so what do you think is missing currently in schools that we are not teaching?
I think there's a lot of things missing, and I love what everyone's shared so far. But I do want to go into the empathy piece, really the radical empathy. I think that on a collective, we have all experienced incredible trauma with COVID. I feel like we have not healed. I think it's beyond trauma-informed care. It's like, it's way beyond that at this point. I think it's more of a centered healing kind of approach instead of trauma-informed, which is holistic. It's the whole child, the whole person healing, honoring different ways of healing. Honoring different ways of growing, and seeing children as true geniuses. And I think in the US, there's an overfixation on the only type of literacy is written word and being able to read. That is like the major focus. And there's like, I don't even know, 25, probably more than that, different types of literacy. And I think education, we're failing our kids, especially with digital literacy, and honoring that and seeing that as not just a skill set, but it's necessary to survive in this evolving world. And I know we're going to get more into literacy, but I think in the US, we limit that. Our focus, when we talk about literacy, it's always reading and writing, reading and writing. So then there's not that empathy there with teachers to see children as human beings, intelligent geniuses, creating, being innovators. You know, it's kind of like, it's beyond, school is beyond the four walls. And Susanna talked about her experience in South Africa and being homeschooled. I homeschool my children. They do a classical thing where they go Mondays and Tuesdays face-to-face, and then the rest of the week, it is about learning different forms of literacy, civic literacy, understanding that the only way they're really gonna really be empathetic people, which I think is something that is what everyone needs just to be global citizens, they have to get out and experience the world. Living is learning. And I think that we have stopped doing that. We've even stopped field trips. And I think COVID-19 has gotten people so scared they don't even get out, you know, get outdoors. And I think that that's also something that's missing is the outdoor element. Being outdoors, interacting with nature. I mean, it's just such a beautiful thing that I think we're missing, and it's a deficit. It really is a deficit. So that's what I wanted to contribute.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up earlier in the opening speech. I noticed that we have more educated people than we have ever had before. And you would think that we would have more empathy, more harmonic society. But it's quite the opposite. We see more conflicts, less empathy, more environmental destruction. So in a way, it seems that education has worked against the humanity at this point, to me at least. Thank you, Lisa. Nicolas, what do you think is missing in the schools that we are not teaching children at the moment?
Well, from all targets of the educational system that I said before, I would also like to focus on diversity, empathy, cooperation, ethos in general. I think that should be the general category. And I also want to focus on my country, Cyprus. For anyone who doesn't know, we have had a long conflict with between the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots in Cyprus. There has been a war in 1974, and since then, the two sides are not in very good terms. And and this is a very hot topic, I think, as well, as you said, Vlad. As Maria Montessori said, preventing conflicts is the work of politics, but establishing peace is the work of education. So on this basis, I would also like to share a story. So I went to school in Cyprus in a Greek-speaking school, and then I graduated, and then I went to Greece to study law. And until I graduated, which was when I was like 23 or 24 years old, in the back of my head was that the other side, the Turkish Cypriot people, were not something. They were like the enemy. They were not people that I could work with or cooperate. Then when I went to London to study, I had two classmates who were Turkish Cypriots and became one of my best friends. And then I started thinking, why did I end up living 23 years believing something which was not accurate? Then I started studying, about what the educational system teaches people in North Cyprus and in South Cyprus. And it seems that what the two communities are doing is that, although, I mean, the extreme descriptions of the national other have been removed from the textbooks, they continue to reproduce an image of the national other not at all flattering. So the national self is sometimes the victim, and sometimes is the powerful, the brave, subject. So until this happens, until this is fixed, we cannot, be very optimistic.
Absolutely, which reminds me that, and that problem that you emphasized now also inspired us to actually, one of the first program that Tomorrow People organized was the regional, was a round table on the regional history of the Balkans, where high school students were asked from Bosnia, Turkey, Macedonia, Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia, obviously, to bring their books from history books that are taught in high schools. And then what we learned there was that, Alexander the Great was Greek, but he was also Macedonian, he was also Bulgarian, he was also Turkish, he was Albanian as well, and of course he was Serbian. The city of Thessaloniki at the very same period in history, very same year, was Serbian, was Bulgarian, was Albanian, was, I don't know, probably all of those countries had Thessaloniki at the same time. And this is what we are taught in our schools, and every country has completely different history that contributes to the problem that you have emphasized now. So I'm just not sure how the teachers are not aware of that. It simply couldn't be true, and how they comply to teach such things. So yeah, and you also mentioned the diversity and inclusion. So what my question, I guess, and I know, Lisa, you are very passionate, we all are, about this topic. So how do you, Lisa, I'm going to ask you first, how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? What do you think it should be about? And particularly in the context of education.
Yeah, thank you, it's a good question. I mean, I think we overcomplicate it, and it's, people have overused it and are thinking that it's something new. And, just like Nicolas was saying, I mean, a lot of these things are as old as time. I think there's also not respect that happens, respect of people that have come before us, respect of collective action before us, what's happening now, really having a global mindset. And I think when it comes to DEI-AB, diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusion, belonging, that's out of order. It has to start with equity, really having that equity lens, really asking yourself, like, who does this affect? What's the purpose of what I'm doing? Really being able to be accountable to self and actions. And so I feel, for me as an educator, I'm always thinking about the individual child, the individual student, the individual person that I'm interacting with. I'm always thinking about the importance of really walking in love, extending grace, practicing presence over perfection. I think we get so caught up in what we think we need to say rather than what we know and what we believe to be true. And that limits our ability to be open to learn. Equity is on a continuum. You never arrive at done. You have to be open to understanding that we have biases. Some biases are good. They're protective factors that allow us to react rather than respond. But a lot of biases are not great. And if we're working from a place of bias, it's going to be hard for us to see the value in diverse learners, neurodivergent learners, not just racially diverse. We know race is a social construct. So people, I think, fixate on melanin or the lack thereof when they're even hiring people, rather than looking at diversity of thought, diversity of education. I'm listening to everybody here and just the diversity of our own schooling and that plethora and wealth of knowledge and how that can really lend well to every child that we work with. So I think diversity is something that unfortunately people have only seen as, ascribed race, and it's like, oh, well, we're a diverse group because we have people from this part of the world and this part of the world. But if people have assimilated to one type of thinking and not really understanding the ethos, right, and what the beauty of diversity, then it's going to be a challenge, I think, for us to really move towards a bigger and brighter future for all children. And so I'll land my plane there.
Absolutely. And I love that you emphasize the importance of seeing people as individuals for who they are. Because yes, it also seems to me that it's understood by many of us as, simply have a colorful team in terms of racial or gender diversity, where they may have exactly the same thoughts and perspectives, educational background, even the cultural background. So there's no true diversity there, in my opinion, either. Kim, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, what can I add to that? Yes, all of everything that Lisa said. I also think that we have to look at valuing intersectionality as a place where we not only connect, but also as a place where we can value those differences. So we can learn from each other's lived experiences and not just look for where we mesh, where we match up, but look for what can be learned through the eyes of every individual. Because we all have such a diverse backgrounds, as everyone has mentioned. We have so many experiences to bring. And the way that I came to be who I am is going to be completely different than the way someone else has come to be who they are. A great example is Susanna and myself. We both love early childhood education. I know Lisa does as well. We both are educated. Our background is in early childhood education, and we're both developmentalists. Yet the journey that we have had as individuals is so different. And so her knowledge comes from an incredible infrastructure of her own. My knowledge comes from an infrastructure of my own. So I think that, to wrap it up, we really need to make sure that we are not just looking for where we mesh, where we connect, but also valuing the individualism of every person that we do connect with.
Absolutely. That is the only way we can learn from them as well. Nick, how do you define diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging?
Well, of course, I agree with everything that has been said. I would also like to add that, the world is so increasingly interconnected, global economy, the internet, the shared burden of climate change. Even so, after COVID, maybe some countries close their boundaries. They will eventually open again. But we came close. We came closer, I think, because there was an urge towards using technology more, and even virtually we came closer. And in such an environment, it is in our own interest to learn, to work and live and cooperate with others. it's as Dalai Lama said, the time has come that 7 billion human beings should learn to live as one small community. And with that being said, I think there's no time to for societies not being not promoting diversity and inclusion. Again, an example from my country, there are schools, for example, that the majority, 19%, is comprised of migrants. This is something that to me is unacceptable. I'm personally, although I'm not an expert in education, I think that affirmative action is important. So there should be actions to put together people from different backgrounds and teachers cultivating this sentiment of all being equal.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. Susanna, do you have anything to add?
Yes, of course. You mentioned the word belonging, so I'm going to start there. I think from a psychological perspective, we all have a very deep-seated need to belong. This is kind of the basis of what it means to be human. We need each other, and now during these COVID times, getting kind of split apart, being alone, feeling isolated, it's really hit that need of belonging. I think it's really important for us as educators to recognize that this is a basic human need that every child has, and to make sure that this is at the forefront to make them feel safe, to make them feel that they have a space, a safe space to belong in the school. That's definitely one of my core values is inclusivity, and to make every child feel that they belong. And that means to me really meeting someone where they are, not where I want them to be, at their exact level. So to prioritize that, I need to connect with this person. I need to understand where they're coming from before I can even begin to train their brain or get them to listen or cooperate. And I think we're doing it backwards, When I was a teacher, we came with our lesson plans. We had a set curriculum. We walked into the classroom. We had a plan. But the priority should be to first build a relationship based on mutual trust and respect with the children in the classroom, to get to know who they are. To establish that good rapport with them, so that they can learn from you. They can't learn without connection. We know this from an emotional intelligence background. This is key. Connection before correction, right? And I think it was Roosevelt who said, one of my favorite quotes of all time is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So as educators, we have to communicate that we care about them as a whole person. I think diversity has become categorical and neat and put in boxes and in ways that we can understand, like what we look like, or race or gender or things like that. And these categories are not inclusive of the whole picture. As I think Lisa said, we have to look at how we think differently. We have to look at our stories, our backgrounds. So I think that there definitely needs to be more training in this area for educators and for the education system in general, just to not look at the surface level of diversity, but to dive deep. It's about neurodiversity, really, not just the labels either, but the humanity that's underneath how we think and how we feel.
Absolutely, and I love that you mentioned that you said you cannot really teach children anything if you do not connect with them. And the way I see that is that people, at least I know for myself, you know, I learn best when I feel the matter, when I feel people, when I feel places. Like I remember smell of people, of my grandmother who died 20 years ago. I still remember her voice. I remember how I felt. I don't necessarily remember what we talked, you know, during the lunch, but I remember very, very important things that she taught me by remembering the feeling, and there is a whole story behind that. So I want to start with you this round by asking you the follow-up question on that. So what are the tools that you think could be used to actually implement that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in education by teachers? So
For teachers.
Yeah, what tools could teacher use that would help them?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think we're still discovering this because, you know, the research is kind of just starting to come out. My focus is on emotional intelligence. So I think that that's a great skill. There are ways to teach emotional intelligence. So if teachers can actually learn it themselves, they can practice self-regulation, they can practice, you know, recognizing the sensations and the feelings that go together. I mean, this is what I focused on teaching kids. And for me, it's absolutely changed my life, my personal life, because I've been not as attached to things. I've been less anxious, you know? I've been able to understand that feelings, yeah, they matter, but it's really just energy flowing through us. It's information that we can choose to believe those kind of thoughts that come from the emotion, or we can choose not to. It's in our power. So I think for me, what's helped, my tools and the tools that I teach the kids is mindfulness is really number one. So mindfulness comes from everyday activities. It's not only meditation and focusing on your breath, although that's the most well-known. You can be mindful about anything. When you're taking a bite and you're starting to dig into your food, do you notice how it smells? Do you notice the texture? You can be a mindful eater. You can be a mindful, you know, walker. You can be mindful in nature. So I think that's the first tool that I would recommend teachers be trained in is mindfulness and emotional intelligence. I think there needs to be training in these areas. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susanna.
Yeah.
Kim, what is there?
Yes, I love what she's saying. And, you know, I think we definitely need to look at the connection that we as educators have with children. Children can't learn, as it's been said, until there's a connection. I also think equally as important, it's equally as important to understand that children can't learn if there's not a connection with self. And so what are some of the tools that we can use to do that? I think it's identifying who children are and then helping them understand and learn who they are. Looking at Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, not all children learn the same. We all have learning preferences. We might be inspired by nature. We might be inspired by language and literacy. We might be inspired by arts. And really that goes back to one of my favorite theorists, Reggio Emilia, the Reggio Emilia approach. It's very naturalistic, very intrinsically motivated. It's all-encompassing, child, family, community. And I think that we have to remember, as Lois Malaguzzi, who really supported the creation of the Reggio Emilia approach, the 100 languages of children. Children learn through 100 languages. They speak through 100 languages. So expressive language, language and literacy, receptive language and literacy doesn't just come from a written word. It comes from experiences and understanding that those experiences are actually languages within themselves. And so I think it's the acquisition of that understanding, the acquisition of really seeing, the ability to see and hear the children that we're working with, and then provide them space where they can engage in those multiple intelligences.
Thank you so much, Kim, Nick, and Lisa. I'm going to twist this question a little bit, but it's around the same topic. To Kim's point, what do you think, should education be personalized to support individual needs and talents? And if so, how? Nick?
Well, everyone of us wants to be treated differently. We always look for that. We always hate when when people, treat us as not special. So I think the educational system should do it in every country, should try its best to treat every person differently, either through tutoring in some very successful countries in terms of education, like in Finland, there is 30% of students that receive special tutoring. Also, teachers should be trained as to try to identify the skills and of every students and support them, and not prevent them from doing something which is out of the box. And of course, this one-size-fits-all kind of education is very detrimental to children. So I think educational system should move away from this, and with the ways I suggested, and others should treat everyone differently.
Absolutely, Nick. I agree. One size fits all education is not only damaging for children, but for the society as well, where nobody feels like they belong there. And I like your point. I see that, like, raising a child, like, I was complaining a lot when I was a kid that my parents would treat me differently. My sisters would complain as well. But that wasn't the bad thing necessarily. Now I understand that, having different characters, different needs, different ways people respond to things, you definitely need a different approach to them. I can even see with my pets, I cannot treat us in the same way my cat and my dog, even though I love them more than anything in the world, equally. Thank you very much. Lisa?
I think for my experience with this topic, I think we're really just talking about equity. I think when we say treating children differently, it's really giving them what they need what their idea of what success would look like, which would require, like Susanna was talking about, Kim was talking about, the ability to make those connections, to just really, what is humanity? What is practicing humanity? We hear that a lot now, humanizing this and humanness. But when you look up the definition of humanity, it talks about kind of just a collective understanding of humans and species. But I think it's even deeper than that. I think we also have to be willing to challenge words and definitions and how we understand the world. I think that, I feel like when it comes to how we work with every single child, it has to be at an individual level for it to truly be successful. But that would be an overhaul in education. I mean, at this point, my experience, people don't even take time for themselves, let alone getting to know the child, really understanding the human geography of the child, really understanding what ethnic identity is. I've had so many people, they're so confused about ethnicity versus nationality. And it's one of those things that it can also really divide us, not having platforms like this where we can share and learn new things from one another, but also like words that what nationality is, not versus, but in relation to ethnic identity. I mean, ethnic identity is all encompassing. And I say that because children come and arrive to us with their entire life already. They come and arrive to us with their entire understanding of truth. I feel like it's very unfortunate, but a lot of times school assimilates children to whatever dominant culture is present instead of honoring the individual child and how they arrive to us and preserving that piece. And so a lot of times we've seen that in the United States, we've seen it with indigenous people, because that's my lived experience. We've seen it with African-American people. We have seen it with immigrants. It's one of these things that is sad to see, that the lack of preserving a person's human geography and who they are, how the lack of that because of fear for what? It's like we would be so progressive and innovative and just like nothing could stop humankind. We could find cures for diseases and everything if we just would preserve the person and really honor the humanness and humanity of every individual and their incredible contributions. And it does have to start in education.
Absolutely. Well, even on a simple basic mathematical level, if you have, only one or two ingredients, there is not much room for creativity. So the more ingredients, the more cultures, the more perspectives, the more beautiful differences you have to work with, the more creativity can emerge. And I totally agree with that. Okay, so to conclude this part, I would like to ask you, and I will start with you, Lisa, again. Do you think that there is something universal that can be taught that should be included in the curriculum in terms of virtues, maybe, before we teach literacy?
Yes, love. I think Dr. Cornel West says it best, that we should strive to be love warriors, that justice is what love looks like in public, and tenderness is what love looks like in private. And if we just learn how to love with no conditions, if we learn how to love with an open heart and an open mind, willing to help each person that we come in contact with, help them because we have the ability to help, really see ourselves as just this collective whole of every life matters, every life is sacred. Yeah, love. We are missing love. And I know that just sounds maybe different for some people, but for me, if we just love people and we love our children over what we think they should be, and we stop getting into the places of, do we like this child? Do I like this colleague? Do you love them? That's the only debt we should owe people, is that we love them. We want to see them experience this life abundantly. They deserve it. They are created wonderfully and beautifully. They are unique. Their life is important. Their life matters. Every single individual person. And then how can we expand that to every living creature if we can't love ourselves and if we can't love one another? So to me, it's love is the thing that we are missing more than anything in our schooling.
Absolutely, Lisa, couldn't agree more.
I totally agree.
Susanna?
No, I just wanted to clap for that.
Yes, but you can add something if you want to.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was so...
Oh, yes, what the question was, is there anything universal that you believe would work for everyone in terms of virtues possibly being taught in the curriculum before we teach literacy?
Yeah. So there's not really a reason to teach literacy until we know why, and I think the why is that we want to connect, that we want to understand one another, that we want to love one another. And there's a story that we all have, and it's important to hear everyone's story. So that would lead so nicely into literacy. I have so many kids who are learning these sounds, and it's very rigid and rigorous phonetics to learn how to read. And they're like, why am I doing this? What do the sounds mean to me? They don't have a meaning, they're not going to want to learn them. So we need to give them that meaning. And to add on to that, I would say one thing that I would love to see in early childhood education all the way up, I think it would apply to every single person, and it's extremely important right now. I think we've seen in the last couple of years how much we need this, is to help individuals find what their passion is, what their purpose is in life. And so that could look like, helping them just find their own belief systems, their own core values that they believe are important. What are they interested in? What are their strengths, and highlighting those strengths. Because I think what we do right now is, if a child is very good at art, let's say, but they're not so good at math, we would, drill the math, and we would not let them create. But that just makes them more like average, like everyone else, right? But if we highlight that strength in art, and maybe we can try to, instruct some math in a different way, like through music or through drawing geometrical shapes, something that is interesting to them, man, we could really help them find that their strength is valuable. Their life matters. They have a purpose for being here. So, and even more than that, we could instruct on more practical tools like entrepreneurship or financial literacy, things that they could take that purpose and passion and apply it to their lives. So I would love to see some kind of curriculum around finding your values, your strengths, and your purpose in life.
I love that. I found my purpose and passion quite recently, but where it was hiding? Early in my childhood. So, and by the way, it was to become a garbage man, and that dream came true. Not for a long time, but for a few months. And it was mission accomplished. I really loved it. Because there was something behind that really revealed what my purpose in life was, that I only understood when I started working as a garbage man. So I want to twist this question a little bit for you, Kim and Nick. What do you think we can learn from children? Like we keep talking about what we should teach them, and many of those things they seem to know. And it got lost, as Susanna said, from the year 7 to 11 or something like that. So, Kim, what do you think we can learn from children? What do you learn from your children?
So much. I think what we can learn from children is everything. I think we can learn to stop and listen. We can learn to stop and see the world. I think we can learn that we need to be in the here and now. I look at how this pandemic has impacted our families and communities. We need to look at social emotional learning as a priority in the children's learning. We can learn so much from them. It's important for us to understand the impact the pandemic has had on children, families, and communities. These familiar environments and routines became unfamiliar very quickly. And we saw a lot of resiliency in our children, but our children lost an important part of their social construct when they lost the ability to properly function outside their homes. And as a developmentalist in child and family education, we rarely separate the social and emotional domains of child development. And this is because they're both so interrelated in every aspect. And so it's the fundamental foundation of the nurture aspect of nurture versus nature. And our children teach us how to nurture when we allow them, or not even allowing, who are we to allow them? But when we provide space for that to happen, when we provide a space that allows or offers the ability to construct knowledge. And so we've got to reflect on that social constructivism component the pandemic has created a gap in much of this ability for children. And the social and emotional strengthening of skills once taken for granted are often now delayed in the overall interactions with children. And so what we can learn from them is that it is through our emotional flux capacity, our ability to be flexible, that our true learning happens.
Absolutely, I love that. I was recently invited to deliver a lecture that was titled Developing Creative and Innovative Minds, that I had to revert to nurturing creative and innovative minds, because I do believe that we are all born with such minds. We just lose them at some point in our lives. Thank you so much, Kim. Nick, what do you think we can learn from children or students?
First to start, just to add something to the previous question on whether there is a universal principle that we should teach children. I have noted down a nice quote from Dalai Lama again, who said, just as we take for granted the need to acquire proficiency in the basic academic subjects, I'm hopeful that a time will come when we take it for granted that children will learn as part of their school curriculum the indispensability of inner values such as love, compassion, justice, and forgiveness. And I think this should come from a top level. So in all countries, educational system should, include these values to love, be compassionate, and sometimes, usually in Western societies, people at high rankings, political as well as business, they tend to prefer and show more, value to competence and skills, and not so much to ethos. And sometimes, the wrong messages are given. And now coming to the question, and connecting this to the question, how what we can be taught about children, there is this philosophical question: how do we treat people who are not yet there, who have not yet learned to love and accept what is different? Should we also treat them with love and compassion, or should we, hate them? Well, my personal opinion is we should not hate anyone. We should hate and disapprove the specific behavior. And this is something I think we can learn from children, because children do not hate; they love everyone.
Absolutely, at least until the certain age when we start interfering with education and culture, at least in my opinion. Thank you very much, Nick. So we have been talking a lot about what we can do for children, what we can teach them, what we can learn from them. But let's see what the needs of the teachers are. So how can we help teachers and support, especially after this pandemic, as we are reopening schools? Lisa, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, most of my day is spent with planning professional development offerings for really teachers. And I think we have a disconnect, in my experience and what I'm seeing right now. The disconnect is, how do we listen to understand rather than listen to solve when we're building professional development offerings for educators? So I think we need to listen to really understand what the needs are, what the wants are, and be committed to that. Be committed to providing teachers what they need and what they want. I think this pandemic also demonstrated for a lot of teachers, myself included, the value and sanctity of my own life, my own mental health, my family, the importance of being connected to my family, the importance of having a balanced life, the importance of rest, that I have to rest. It's an absolutely necessary component to being innovative and being creative. I think that we need to revamp our expectations of teachers. I think a lot of parents, guardians, family structures really appreciated teachers during the lockdown, because guess what? There was nowhere to send the children, and they desperately needed that support and help. But you know, one thing about human beings is we are resilient, but the flip side to that is that we're also very forgetful. And so I think we've even forgotten the stress that a lot of parents were under because they did not have really what they deemed as childcare, right? And understanding the significant importance of socialization, to be connected to one another, to gather, to convene, to talk, to share, to listen, to love. It's just a beautiful thing. And so I think we also need to honor teachers and where they are, meet them where they are, give them what they want, give them a retirement wage, give them a wealth wage. Everybody says give them a livable wage, give them a wealth wage where they can build wealth and they don't have to work 3 other jobs to make ends meet. There's something really broken about our system in the United States and how we do not treat our teachers. And so I think that we have to learn to listen so we can come together collectively and really make some policy changes that is really going to not just affect teachers, but the greater good. Teaching is the one career that prepares children, people for every career. And it's the most underpaid, underappreciated profession. And that to me is sad, because during that first lockdown, everybody was like, we can't. First, it was major criticism of teachers, right? You got to flip it quick to virtual. How come you guys aren't doing this? I mean, my goodness, we were all trying to survive. And I mean, kudos to teachers for getting in the trenches, wearing face masks, staying 6 feet, distance from kids, not being able to hug them, can't even see the facial expressions, the nonverbal cues that we give children, that really makes a community a community. So I think we just need to listen to teachers and think to ourselves, those of us that have the power to make policy changes, what do you need to live? If that's how much money you need to live, you need to make sure you extend that to teachers. So I'll land my plane there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing up some really, really important points. And it's true, we often don't notice things that we have until we lose them. And it's not only in the States. My grandmother was a teacher, among many other things that she was. Yeah, I remember what she told me was, well, you don't go for a teaching career if you want to become rich. And that part I remember. But also I think that it's one of the most important, if not the most important professions that we have. And it is very important for that it is appreciated and that teachers are able to maybe not get rich, but why not? to live decently, exactly. Nick, what do you think? How do you think we can support teachers with their needs?
Well, as I said, I'm not an expert on education, but thinking and suggesting what is more relevant after the pandemic and where we should focus on. I think this new era brings us, as I said, in a very interconnected world, even more. Digital literacy is very important. We all learned, to live virtually. We see it now with discussion around metaverse and other things. So digital literacy, how to make a website, how to use social media. These are extremely important tools and skills for every person, especially children now, who are going to be the citizens of the recent future. of the near future. Then self-management, I think, is very important. So I think we have learned how to be productive and how to manage our time on our own. Of course, networking, how to treat others are always relevant. And I think fundamentals of business and economics are also very important skills. So the next day after the pandemic makes all these things even more relevant and important for the educational system to put in the center.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that point. I know that for me, switching to the virtual environment was a hell, and teachers had much greater challenges. I'm sure. Susanna, how do you think we can support teachers and what their needs are? And as a psychologist, what do you think their needs would be and support after the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we've got to really change the conversation around what we need as humans and what teachers need specifically is, I think honestly, some self-love, self-care, some rest, like Lisa said. When we talk about self-care, it's self-preservation. And it's not just for themselves, it's for all the kids that they interact with. As you said, Lisa, they've just jumped in the trenches and they've done the work. And I've seen a lot of my teacher friends, who are really burnt out, and it's so sad, So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for using self-care strategies and tools. And that doesn't mean bubble baths and taking a vacation. I'm not talking about, luxury in that way. I'm talking about, doing the inner work, sitting with the uncomfortable emotions and the anxiety that is around us, the fear that of the unknown, helping teachers to speak up about what they need, to let them know that their voice is going to be heard. Having those hard conversations that would be easier to avoid, I think, is really important for teachers and for, the schools. Letting them express what they need and their boundaries as well. Like, I'm burnt out at this point. I can only do this much work, or I need to be able to delegate these tasks to other people. And we need to listen. We need to listen to teachers right now. I think, they're the ones who know what they need most.
Absolutely. Kim?
Thank you for this question. Look, part of humanizing education includes teachers. It is one of the most important components. And I think one of the things that we have to be willing to do is step back and provide space for these superheroes to take off their invisible capes and feel and without shame, feel without shame, rest without shame, and have those moments for themselves, for their families, because we often in our society see superheroes as complete strength. And every superhero I have ever seen hurts just like every other human being. So we've got to see them. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. We've got to see them, we've got to hear them, and we've got to support them in working through their emotions and their needs without shame.
Thank you so much, Kim. Well, I cannot believe that we are almost at the end. We have 12 more minutes, but I would like to give you the opportunity to share something that you were not asked and you think is very important related to this topic, maybe to your personal area of expertise, that you think is important for the audience to hear. In short, the message that you have for teachers and the entire world. Obi, please mute yourself. Thank you. Susanna, your message.
You know, I think we've already covered so many amazing topics, but you know, the message that I keep hearing over and over again is how desperately we need empathy, love, and connection from human to human. And that really is my continued message, is that we need to see each other for, you know, exactly who we are, where we're at, and what's going on inside of ourselves, not what we see from the outside. I think in education, we're very quick to judge. I mean, I know that's a very human quality. We judge, that's what our brain is designed to do. But, you know, we see these students with their behaviors. We direct our attention to their behaviors in class, and the behaviors are really just a sign of what's going on underneath. So instead, we need to shift our attention to what their feelings are, what their thoughts are, you know, where they might, you know, maybe they had a really bad morning, or maybe they're in a grumpy mood. You know, when I was a student, I was very fidgety. I always had something to play with. I was doodling and I got in trouble for that. That was seen as a misbehavior, you know, and I still do that as an adult, you know, I still need that. So we need to, rather than see behaviors as, you know, they're behaving badly and they need to be given a timeout, or we need to see it as a sign that maybe there's an underlying need. Maybe they need special support to focus, or they need, you know, they need a special way to learn. So that is my message, that we don't just see children for their behavior and the skills that they're gaining or their grades on their test, that we see them for who they are underneath on the inside. And we address that and we put our attention there.
I love that. Thank you so much. Kim?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Look, humanization isn't just connecting on a macro level. It's through microisms. It's through small connections that the beginning of a true humanizing foundation can begin. So if we can start at the grassroots and build from there, it's going to impact us in an amazing way as we move forward. But we've got to stop looking at it as some grandiose macro ability that everyone has to have. Small connections, micro connections mean more than we can ever, any of us can ever imagine. So begin small, because small becomes big.
Absolutely. Well, we are all born small after all. That's very symbolic to it. Nick, what would be your message?
Well, I would like to say something about how I think it's important to be a well-rounded person, and that is why we need to focus on well-rounded students. Looking at the most successful countries in terms of their educational system. As I said before, I also saw that Japan's education system is based heavily in producing well-rounded students, and the students are taught, all regular subjects. They also take art, homemaking, music, and physical education. Again, this is something that has been around since ancient Athens. Plato thought that, believed that, Athenians should obtain education that would, make them, it would produce citizens who could operate as members of the civic community. There is another quote I like, which says that a master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he's doing. So I like this way of life and way of thinking. And this is, I think, something that the educational system should try to produce, well-rounded people to, not just focus on, knowledge per se, but also in all other values that we talked about.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Teachers are listening. Here, Lisa, what would be your message?
I think I want to end with the spirit of true liberation and the book by Dr. Angela Davis, that freedom is a constant struggle. I think that if we commit our mind to collectively band together globally, to always ensure that there is a place for free thought, for not well-meaned intentions, but to interrogate even well-meaning intentions, to ensure that we're not just practicing humanity, we're not just preserving humanity, we are trying to progress humanity. We are trying to keep up with the evolution of humanity, because that will never stop. And so in that same vein, freedom is a constant struggle, because people are fearful what freedom brings. They think that there will be a loss of power to extend love, there will be a loss of power to extend resources. And I think for us as educators, people committed to being people that are love warriors, true love warriors, we always have to be committed to liberation for all people. Regardless of what we think is right and wrong, every single person deserves to live, to be free, to be able to love, to be safe, to be heard, to be able to eat, sleep in safe environments, not be in war-torn countries. So yes, I think that the message that I want to convey is that my only thing in this life is to always stand for freedom for all people, because it is a constant struggle. And as an educator, I'm committed to making sure that everybody that comes in my path knows that their life is worthy and that they are absolutely precious and wonderfully made.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you all for these very, very powerful and beautifully insightful messages. Our students and the entire world is happy to have you as educators, and thank you for being a light and a hope for the humanity. So thank you again for your time and sharing your messages at this panel discussion. So for everyone else, see you at the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vlad.